This is my 2000 Lexus LX470, and today I'm going to be replacing the driver's side CV axle. Now, to start off, I'm not really looking forward to this job for a couple of reasons. The first being that I recently did the passenger side CV axle and it was quite a bit of work. Secondly, the boot failed on the driver's side while I was 500 miles away from home up in the trails of Joshua Tree. But since I know how to do it, it should be pretty straightforward. Let's get into it. Here we are under the car. The first thing is to get this dust cap off. Behind this is a snap ring that holds the CV axle on. Just like that. Right here we can see our snap ring. You're going to have to get a special set of snap ring pliers, mainly used for transmissions or other applications, as your regular ones with little two hooks or the meant for the two eyes won't work. Something sort of like this. Just like that, we have our snap ring off. So now our CV axle is loose from the hub right here. I'm actually going to replace this hub flange right here for reasons I'll get into later, so let's get this off. So there's one washer right here, and behind this is the cone washer, which will have to be hammered off. So now that we have the outer bolts off, what we're gonna do is put the nuts back on just a little bit and hit it with a hammer for these cone washers to come off. Starting to move a little bit on this one. And just like that, we have our cone washer. Now let's rinse and repeat for the next 6. Alright, so now we can remove our last cone washer here. Just like that. Now the cone washers are a bit hard to get off if your car is rusty like mine, or if there is corrosion like mine. So it took a lot longer than anticipated, but now we can remove our flange just like that. And I will show you why in a little bit as to why we're replacing this. There's some wear here. Next, we can go ahead and remove our tie rod, our ABS sensor, and our brake caliper right here. So first, I'm going to remove this bracket here for the ABS wire, then I'll remove the sensor and the bracket for the tie rod. Just like that. Now this wire is free here. I'm gonna put this back in here so I don't lose it, just very loosely. And next I'll get the ABS sensor out. So I'm actually having a little bit of trouble removing this ABS sensor, and I don't want to have it round off and be stuck in there forever. So I'm actually just going to follow the electrical connection up all the way and disconnect it from there. So now that I've disconnected the ABS sensor from up top, let's go ahead and get the rest of these brackets that hold the brake line and the ABS sensor off. Huh. I really don't want to round it off. Now let's try a closed end wrench. So now that I have this removed, I'm just going to remove this little harness clip right here, and then we can remove the tie rod and the brake caliper. One ABS connector with the harness, had to do it the hard way. Alrighty, so just to break free the tie rod bracket, I'm going to use a breaker bar with my 19mm socket on it. And there's one more bolt behind it. So now that both of them are broken free, I can now get it out with the power ratchet. And just like that, our tie rod is free. So now we can go ahead and remove our brake caliper right here. It's a 17mm. I'm gonna break it loose by hand before zipping it out with the power ratchet. On second thought, I'm actually gonna use the breaker bar. I don't think it broke off. Now we can remove our caliper. Make sure to tie it up with a bungee cord to something sturdy. So now here comes the fun part. We have to remove this nut for the ball joint here on the upper control arm and the lower ball joint here for the lower control arm. First, let's get the cotter pins out. Just like that. So now that we have the cotter pin removed on the upper control arm, let's go ahead and get the ball joint out. The socket size is 21mm. Now we have our castle nut off. Let's give it a few whacks with the hammer. And just like that, it's separated right there. Now let's get the lower ball joint off. So here we are on the lower control arm. First, let's get the cotter pin out. And that just bent my plier. And I just broke the cotter pin. Great. There's one half of it and the other half of it. Now we can go ahead and get this nut off right here. It is size 27mm. So I'm going to loosen it to about here, give it a couple whacks with a hammer and see if this ball joint will separate from the knuckle. So I'm having a little bit of trouble getting this lower ball joint off. The ball joint fork that I actually have doesn't fit as it's too small. I'm gonna jack up the lower control arm a little bit while this is still finger loose, see if I can get it to pop when there's a little bit of resistance. Whew, still not coming off. Got it! Alright, so now that I have both of the ball joints loose, I'm going to finish getting off the nut for the lower control arm and then slowly lower down the knuckle. Be careful as the knuckle is extremely heavy. Here's our castle nut for the lower ball joint. And now we can slowly drop this down. Let's make sure that our ABS wire is clear and won't get caught up on anything. So we're free on the bottom now. Just lower this a little bit more. And just like that, our knuckle is completely free. Oh, that's heavy. So now that we have everything out of the way, we can see where the CV boot is torn and the subsequent mess that it made all over the lower control arm and the surrounding area. Alright, so now we are under the car and we're going to remove the CV axle from the differential, or torque tube if you want to call it. What you're going to want to do is smack it right here with a chisel and your biggest hammer. Let's get this off here. Alright, I think we got it here. Let's get our drip tray, as some gear oil might come out. And just like that, it's popped out. Comparing our new and old axles, we can see that this one is split right there and that this is a non-OEM axle. This is the reason that I can't use a Toyota reboot kit for the axle, as it just won't fit. Trust me, I've tried and had to replace the whole axle. Additionally, we can see that this is not painted here and already started rusting, and Toyota painted all 3 sections of the axle to prevent against corrosion. Additionally, since I have the CV axle out, I'm going to replace the seal that goes into the differential, as I really don't want to have to do this job again. I will also take some time to clean the surrounding area of all the grease that went everywhere from when the boot split. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get this seal out here. I'm just going to use a standard pry bar and pry it out slowly and evenly from each side. So there's the spring that goes around the seal and holds the tension. Okay, and just like that, it's out, and of course I don't have my pan. So here's our old seal. There was nothing particularly wrong with it, but it's kind of one of those jobs where it's a while you're in there, as I really don't want to have to do this all over again just to replace a seal. I'm now going to take some sandpaper or steel wool and clean the outer race right here before I drive the new seal in. Here we have our new seal. I'm actually going to use the old seal here to drive the new one in partially before I grab a aluminum rod and start tapping it. There are seal drivers which I do not currently possess. So now that I'm done with the old seal and driving it in with this, I have a thinner rod that I can use to get around this edge right here. You'll start to hear a distinctive sound change when it bottoms out with the race for where the seal rides in. And now our seal is fully seated. We can now put the new CV axle in. So now we are ready to reinstall the new axle. As a precautionary, I'm going to put some lubricant on the seal and on the side of the CV axle that goes into the differential to ensure that the seal doesn't tear and aligns properly. So now the best way that I have found to install this is to make sure that this circlip on the edge right here is aligned facing upward where the gap is on the bottom. Another reason I put grease on here is to make sure that gravity doesn't work against me and I can keep this circlip aligned properly. Now we can grab our mallet and give it a few whacks. Take it back, our hammer. And just like that, it's in. We can go ahead and get started with reassemble of the knuckle. Alrighty, so here comes the fun part of trying to align the knuckle here with the lower ball joint and getting everything slotted in correctly. Let's see if I can do this as just one person. Okay, so I have it lined up with the lower ball joint. Just gonna keep jacking it up a little bit. And then I will scoot it over and put the castle nut on. So I have the upper ball joint bolted in. Now I'm just going to jack it up from the hub right here to get the lower ball joint seated. So the hard part is now over. All we have to do is torque everything to spec. The torque spec for the upper control arm ball joint is 81 foot-pounds. Now we can go ahead and get our cotter pin in. Moving on to the lower ball joint here, the torque spec for this castle nut is 118 foot-pounds. Now we can go ahead and torque down the tie rod bracket here that goes into the knuckle. The torque spec is 108 foot-pounds. Next, we can torque the brake caliper to spec. The torque spec is 108 foot-pounds. Next, we have some of the lines and brackets for the ABS sensor as well as the brake hose here. They are all size 12mm. For all of these, I'm just going to give it the Guten tight with my power ratchet. And just like that, it's time to finish it off by putting the hub flange back on. Now, the reason I'm going to be replacing this hub flange is because of wear. On the passenger side, when I replaced the CV axle, I found that the new OEM axle would not slide into the previous hub flange. After hours of trying to hammer it on, I felt that something was wrong. As a precautionary, I bought a new hub flange and it slid on like butter. I'll show a picture here of how the previous axle flange wore out to the fact that it would not receive a new axle. To get this new hub flange on, we first have to take off the old gasket. And place on our new gasket. And then we can place our new hub flange on. Just like that. Now we can put our cone washers on, our regular washers, and then our 6 nuts right around this perimeter. Now we can put our nuts on. The torque spec for these 6 nuts is 24 foot-pounds. Now that this is all torqued to spec, we can now put our snap ring on. A good test to make sure that the snap ring is aligned and the axle won't fall out during normal driving is to just whack it with a mallet, and if you see the snap ring pop off or anything else come off, then you have an issue. I don't see anything right now, so I'm going to go ahead and put on the dust cap. This is our last step. And now we are done. And just like that, I'm going to call it a job done. I will top up the differential for any fluid that was lost and monitor for leaks from the seal. This job is not that DIY friendly, as you need to remove the whole knuckle and need some specific tools, but it still can be done. I'm pretty dirtied up and I'm going to call it here. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed and this helped you, feel free to drop a comment. If I screwed or messed anything up while working on this vehicle, feel free to drop a comment as well, as I always enjoy learning. Thank you.